Welcome to the Benzo Free Podcast, your home for an honest, straightforward, and personal discussion about anti-anxiety drugs, their effects, and how to deal with dependence and withdrawal. Whether you have taken benzodiazepines, Z drugs, or any other tranquilizers, know someone who has, or you just want help dealing with chronic anxiety and insomnia, this is your podcast. I'm your host, D.E. Foster, author of the book, Benzo Free, The World of Anti-Anxiety Drugs and the Reality of Withdrawal. I'm so glad you joined us today. Please stick around and let me bend your ear for a few minutes. You just might feel a little better on the other side. Hello there, this is D, and welcome to episode 10 of the Benzo Free Podcast. Wow. This is our 10th episode. That's sweet. That is pretty cool. I am really stoked about what we are doing here. And yes, even though it's just me on this side of the microphone, this is truly a group venture. Without your feedback and input, I wouldn't have half this show, or all this show for that matter, so please keep it coming. You know, I've been doing pretty well lately, actually. Working on this podcast, it keeps me quite busy. It's been really busy lately, but it's good. Busy is good. You know, in fact, it got me thinking about a few things. I remember an old adage my dad used to teach me, and that was, work is a blessing. You know, as a kid, that was perhaps the most stupid thing I'd ever heard. But with age comes wisdom. Well, maybe not, but you know, I'm going to stick to it, and I'm going to pretend that with age comes wisdom. You see, during benzo withdrawal, our minds become filled with enemies, ninja warriors, imagine, waiting in the crevices of our brains, ready to pounce on the least little sign of weakness. A thought, a suggestion, a sound, a smell, a cry, a complaint, anything. Any trigger can release the ninja's vicious attack. And what do they attack? Inner peace. They hate inner peace. It's their mortal enemy, and they will stop at nothing to destroy it. Instead, they will tell you lies. They whisper to you, life is hopeless, and you get really sad. Or, life is unfair, and you get mad. Or, life is pain, and you get scared. And most of all, they tell you that this pain, these thoughts, these symptoms will never go away. That this is permanent, and you'll never get better, over and over and over again. They whisper this into the recesses of your mind. These are all lies. But the ninjas are so sly, they convince you it's all true. But work? Oh, the ninjas don't like a brain that is working. Their whispers wither away. They lose their control. You know, it can be hard to work while in withdrawal. We all know that. But if you can, do so. It's good to work when you can. And work can be anything, your job, doing taxes, cleaning the house, reading to your son, prepping for your podcast. Anything that occupies your mind, even for a little while, gives it a rest from those damn ninjas. Just today, the ninjas came back for me. You know, I have triggers. Yeah, big surprise, right? Every one of us has triggers. And some days I feel very strong. And I know I can handle the ninjas. And then the trigger comes, and whoosh, the ninjas take control. And I listen to their lies, and I believe them again. But then I go to my desk, and I work on the podcast. Or even better, I get some new feedback from one of you. Someone tells me how the podcast helped them, or what their struggles are, or wants to know where to get help. And I write back to you. And slowly, the ninjas' voices fade. Benzo withdrawal is a temporary condition. I'm going to say that again. Benzo withdrawal is a temporary condition. Please, don't let the ninjas convince you otherwise. So today we have made a small adjustment to our format. Like I said, we are continually changing things to improve, or at least I hope they're improvements. So today we're going to start off with our intro and mailbag, which we always do. Then we're going to go to our Benzo news section, but we're going to shorten that up a little bit, I think. Well, instead, I think we're just going to provide some teasers, very high-level highlights of what we've covered in the week. And then next, we're going to try out a new section called Benzo Spotlight. And in this section, we're going to briefly spotlight one organization, film, event, video, legislative effort. What we're going to provide is anything which might be of interest or use to our listeners. And then we're going to move on with our format, go to our Benzo stories, and then our feature topic. And we have our very first interview. Yay! It is with Elizabeth McCarthy, and Liz is a benzo survivor from 10 milligrams of Klonopin. But she is also a psychotherapist who often works with benzo patients, and she is on the medical advisory board of the Benzodiazepine Information Coalition. She has been working on raising awareness, helping patients, helping her own self recover. She has been very involved in the benzo community for several years. So please stay tuned for the interview. Liz provides some great insights as both a patient and a counselor, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. And that wraps up our intro. Right after a couple quick things. You didn't think I forget this part, did you? We need feedback. I say this every time, but I truly mean it. I read every comment, question, or story submitted and reply to each one. This isn't just a slogan. I really want to hear from you. As I said earlier, it's the feedback from each one of you that keeps me going. So please, tell me what you think. I would love to hear from you. You can comment on this episode, or even better, you can visit our feedback form at benzofree.org/feedback. You can also email me at podcast@benzofree.org and just send me your questions, comments, interests, changes, whatever you have. I want to hear it. And by the way, don't forget, sign up for our mailing list at benzofree.org/subscribe. And one last thing, of course, before we move on, the Benzo Free podcast is for informational purposes only and should never be considered medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by our listeners and interview guests on this podcast, whether read from textual submissions or presented in their own voice, do not necessarily reflect those of the Benzo Free podcast or of its host. Got that? Good. Let's move on. This one is from Jörg in Bern, Switzerland. Now, I hope I pronounced that right. It also might be Jörg, depending on the country of origin of the name, but I'm going to stick with Jörg since it is the German pronunciation that I looked up, and I truly apologize if I'm wrong. Please let me know this, okay? Anyway, he says, quote, I am the caregiver of my wife, Ruth. She is 22 months off benzos, but still on AD. She has been polydrugged by doctors and is still suffering. I really appreciate your great work with benzofree.org. I have a shy suggestion. Could you create a list of people concerned by benzo withdrawal, sorted by country or state? This would be great. I am looking for German-speaking people who are in or went through a benzo withdrawal. I already found Beatrice from Zurich. We both were participating in a workshop from Jennifer Lee. She will send you her story. We need your help to create a network of benzo victims in German-speaking and all other countries. My wife does not speak English. For her, it is difficult to get any information about benzos. Thank you in advance. Be blessed and kind regards, Jörg. I just want to let everybody know that Beatrice's story, which she refers to in this comment, I will be sharing that in the next episode, in case you were wondering, so that's coming up. As Jörg said in his comment, it's not just doctors who are needed, but people in different languages who have been through this. I can't imagine how, isolating it is not to have someone or some group in your native tongue to share with and learn from. This is a true need, and I'm glad you brought that up. First off, since I hate to recreate the wheel, I need to ask our listeners, if anyone knows of a listing like this on the web. If you do, please let me know, and I'll share it on the podcast and website. Or if anyone listening speaks German and can help, please let me know, and I might be able to put you in contact with them. But as for the long-term solution, this just might be someplace where benzo-free could help out. I can't make any promises, but I'm going to start looking into this. Since I have a background in database programming, setting up an international benzo contact list might be an area where we could provide benefit. I know there are a lot of discussion boards and a lot of information sites and wonderful things out there, but I really don't know what exists in different languages and in different countries. And it would sure be nice if there was one location where everybody could go to and to find that information. So please let me know what you think about this idea as the listener and provide any suggestions you have. I really want your input on this. And if we move forward and start developing it, I'd like to know what you might think it should look like. So I'd love to hear from you. Thanks. And thanks, Jörg, for your comment. I really appreciate you sharing. And that brings us to the Benzo news. Here are the highlights of the week. We're going to keep this very abbreviated, like I mentioned in the intro. On Friday, we reposted an article by Dr. Christy Huff about her personal struggles with Xanax. She provided some solid resources for the patient. It's worth taking a look at that one. On Sunday, I wrote a post about WBAD, where I encouraged people to think about either joining or, even better, helping to start planning an event for World Benzodiazepine Awareness Day, which is on July 11th, just 4 months away. On Monday, the Benzo Free Facebook page reached 1,000 likes. That was cool. Thanks for all your help on that one. Also on Monday, we reposted an article from the Harvard Medical School, which listed 10 proven tips to sleep better at night. And on Tuesday, we reposted a blog post from the BIC titled 10 Things Uninformed Benzodiazepine Prescribers Do. Now, all of these news items can be found on our Facebook page at facebook.com/benzofree, and of course, I have put links to each one in our show notes. And just in case you might think that we have been ignoring our own Benzo Free blog, well, you're right, actually. I have to admit, I just haven't had the time to write any blog posts lately. The podcast, updating the website, and corresponding with the listeners have taken all my time lately. But still, I really hope to remedy that soon and start releasing at least a couple of blog posts each week. In fact, I might even be getting some help in that area from some of our listeners who have offered to help out as contributing writers. If this sounds like something you'd like to do, let me know. Today's spotlight shines its light on benzo information sites. There are hundreds, even thousands of support sites and groups for benzo dependents all around the world, or at least I thought there were. I assume there are. I'm just starting to uncover them, but I found some amazing ones in the process. Now, many of you have heard me talk plenty about the Benzodiazepine Information Coalition, BIC, or World Benzodiazepine Awareness Day, WBAD. Or perhaps you have chatted on Benzo Buddies, the largest online forum, or even visited benzo.org.uk, where they host the Ashton Manual. I've talked and or highlighted each one of these groups at different times on the website, Facebook page, or podcast, and they are some amazing resources. In fact, I've put links to each of these in our show notes, and they are also on the bottom of every page of the Benzo Free website right now. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. And part of my job at Benzo Free is to help find new stuff. And that is what I have today. I was researching a new one this week. Well, at least it was a new one for me. It's been around for a couple of years. So some of you may have already checked it out. It's called the Alliance for Benzodiazepine Best Practices, and it can be found at benzoreform.org. This group formed out of TIBS, that stands for the International Benzodiazepine Symposium. This was a symposium focused on raising awareness and improving education on benzodiazepines and Z-drugs within the medical community, and it took place in Bend, Oregon back in 2017. There's a lot of wonderful information on this website, both for the patient and medical professional, including a very interesting video from the 2017 TIBS Symposium, which you can access from the homepage. So please, check them out. Much like the BIC, WBAD, and others, they are all doing wonderful work and need our support. And please send me resources which you have found helpful. I've received a few of them and I'm researching them now, and we'll be covering some of those in upcoming episodes. Which then brings us to Benzo Stories. Now I told you we would have some international stories coming up, and we do. But due to the length of today's interview, I pushed back a couple of them to later episodes. But today I needed something very short since we have an interview as our feature. And guess what? Ask and you shall receive. So here is a short 1-paragraph story and comment from Terry in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And yes, I know what you are thinking. I have been to Hot Springs a couple of times. In fact, my grandparents used to live in southern Missouri in Ozark country, not too far north of Hot Springs. I used to visit them often and learned how to fish with my grandpa and ski with some friends we had down there on Table Rock Lake. The country around Hot Springs and Ozark country is just breathtaking in my mind. Rolling hills, lots of trees, amazing crafts, incredible bluegrass music, wonderful down-home cooking. Part of me will always belong to Ozark country. It's part of my childhood, and I'm pretty fond of the area. But enough about that. Let's hear from Terry. Terry says, quote, I wanted to share a piece of my story. I am 17 months benzo-free off Klonopin. It has been the hardest thing I have ever done. I have had numerous symptoms, most along the vagus nerve corridor. Panic attacks, heart palps, gastro issues that I liken to a chemical stroke. I have lost bowel control and hardly been able to stand and walk. Probably most distressing has been sleeping issues such as central sleep apnea. I have been encouraged by your podcast. I have been searching for a reassuring voice, and you have provided one. Keep up the great work. End quote. Thanks, Terry. I'm so sorry you had to go through this. You are healing, and you're going to continue to heal. Please, take care of yourself and definitely keep in touch. We really want to know how you're doing. And for the rest of you, don't forget, I still need stories. Long ones, short ones, whatever you have, they are integral to this podcast, and I really want to hear from you. So please send them in. And thanks again to all those who have shared. We are honored and grateful. And that brings us to our feature. Today we have our first interview. That is pretty nice. Our guest today is Elizabeth McCarthy, and she was generous enough of her time to talk with us. So I recorded this interview with her this past Saturday on March 16th. Since this is a phone interview, my voice will sound the same as I do in the studio because, well, I get to speak into the studio microphone and the phone at the same time. Unfortunately, our guest voice will sound like it is recorded over the phone because, well, it is. So I did some cleaning up of the audio, but it will still sound like a phone call, and I will keep working on things that I can do to help improve that over time. So enough about that. Let's learn about Liz. Elizabeth McCarthy is in private practice as a psychotherapist in Royal Oak, Michigan. Her primary areas of clinical work focus on attachment and trauma, and psychiatric drug withdrawal and recovery. Before completing a year of postgraduate study in mental health, Liz earned her master's degree in counseling from Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan. She previously studied at Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, where she completed a master's degree in fine arts. Liz brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, both personal and professional, to the issues surrounding psychiatric drugs and the significant problems that can be encountered when taken for even a short period of time. Owing to her own experience of benzodiazepine withdrawal, Liz first became involved in supporting and educating individuals across the globe as a moderator for an online benzodiazepine peer support group in 2006. It was through that experience that Liz became an ardent participant in furthering awareness and education about the complex problems associated with benzodiazepine use and discontinuation, and developing a foundational understanding such that one is more able to make conscious, informed decisions about their own health and well-being. So, let's join the interview. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm so glad that you came on. And as I mentioned to you before we started this, that you are my first interview guest on this show. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
No, I feel honored.
I thought maybe we'd just start out real quick with you telling me a little bit about your current position and what kind of work you do now. I know we mentioned your bio, but maybe you could elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, as you mentioned in my bio, I am in private practice and have been since 2009. I work with whatever comes into my office, basically, but it often harks back to early trauma. And it's remarkable how many people also come in experiencing problems due to the medications that they're on.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Unknowingly, yeah.
I said you have a lot of experience counseling patients with like chronic anxiety. Have you seen this increasing lately?
I think yes. In 2016, absolutely.
Okay.
There was quite an uptick, and just from a social political standpoint, things were quite intense, and people were quite worried.
Understand.
And I think that they still are. But I hear that less and less. It's more just a trepidation about their own lives.
Okay.
It's interesting how that's faded.
That is interesting. Maybe we should open up with just your personal experience. I understand that you've had direct experience with benzodiazepines in your life.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I was in a very severe car accident, head-on collision.
Okay.
And was initially put on Klonopin, I think it was 1990. And at the time, I was also on a lot of narcotic painkillers. But the Klonopin was absolutely my foray into psychiatry. And that started out with 2 milligrams. Straight out, 2 milligrams of Klonopin.
I'm familiar with that. That was my drug too, and 2 milligrams was my top that I was on.
10 was my top.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. So in 2006, in preparation for a change in treatment direction, they had me go off the Klonopin, 10 milligrams of Klonopin, cold turkey.
You're kidding? Cold turkey?
With, no education, no preparation whatsoever. Sent me home alone. Told me to stop the drug.
How did you get through that?
It was a terrifying experience. And I think that, we all, each of us finds a way to get through this. And I found as kind of my guiding light was an experience my brother had shared with me.
Okay.
And something quite horrific that he had gone through. And I just held that in front of myself. I said, if he could do it, I can do this.
That's good to have somebody to lead the way.
Yeah. So at the time, I was quite isolated and socially isolated. And I was in such a state that I couldn't even push the button on my computer to turn it on.
Hmm.
And so for 8 months, I sat in the dark. Well, I did, to be fair, I did learn along the way that I was in quote-unquote Benzo Withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
And that what I was experiencing was normal given the circumstances. The severity of the withdrawal was I can describe it in a word. It was violent.
Yeah.
I was thrown into this very extreme state for about 8 months. And then one day it just, everything just kind of calmed down. Now, when I say everything calmed down, for 3 years I walked around with sunglasses and earplugs in my ears. because I had such an intolerance for light and sound and touch and taste and smell and that kind of thing.
Right.
My body still was in a state of hyperarousal. It was that more extreme, hallucinating, just utter terror to leave my home, to go out into the community. That when I say things settle down, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. How long have you now been off the drug?
13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Do you still have any lingering protracted symptoms?
Yes, but it's not anything that interrupts my life.
Okay.
And it's tolerable. I still have heart palpitations, surges of adrenaline or cortisol that just come out of nowhere. And over the years, I think I've become quite adept at just kind of managing that or being with it, really. Understanding where it comes from, knowing that it's temporary and that it's going to stop.
Right.
So when I was able to actually turn on my computer, the first thing that I did was Google Benzodiazepine withdrawal and learned that there was this whole community out there who were talking about and describing my very experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just stunning to me. I was excited. I was horrified. But, you know, it's when you find your tribe, it feels really, really good.
That is true. That is true. I must agree with you there. When you, I know you were still probably in some protracted state at the time when you decided to go back to school. How did you handle all that?
It was a goal that I had in my mind for a very long time, and I just decided it was time to do it.
Well, good.
It was very difficult at times, as you and others who might be listening can attest to. Your cognitive ability tends to rise and fall. Mm-hmm. And at times, just not being able to take in any information whatsoever. Almost like there's just, it goes further than kind of this brain fog that people often talk about. And it's almost like there's a wall there and nothing can come in.
Right.
And so I experienced that in grad school quite a bit.
Okay.
And so I just, somehow I managed.
I find that admirable because I've thought about going back and getting some additional training, even college, but I had the same problem with the brain fog and with that wall. I just don't know that I can memorize anything right now. I'm hoping I will soon, and maybe by your lead, I might have some encouragement to actually go do that. But yeah, it's hard for me to learn new things at this point.
I think it also helped that I had a very deep passion mm-hmm. for this area of study, and I think through my own personal experience, gained an even deeper appreciation for this kind of work. And
that's great.
So I think that it was a good decision. It is, I feel well matched for what I'm doing. In fact, I've never felt better matched to anything in my life. That's
wonderful. I'm glad you found a purpose out of all this. I think we're both in the same boat where we both have found a purpose through this experience and made it what could have been which was maybe the most horrible experience of our lives, but turned it into something for good. And I admire that. I'm mm-hmm. really happy you've done that with your life. How has this experience, and let's move into your counseling a little bit. I understand you've worked with several patients who have dealt with different prescription drug issues, including a lot of benzodiazepines. What have you seen? What kind of things do you see come through? How have you learned to work with different patients that are suffering from this?
as with any client who walks into my office, I meet them where they are.
Okay.
Try to understand in as nuanced way as I possibly can what they're going through, and to help normalize that. Give it context.
Right. So treating the patient as a whole instead of just saying the issue is yes. Okay. That's great. What have you seen primarily? What has been the primary complaints or people who have come through, or what type of issues have you faced?
It's as varied as you can possibly imagine.
Okay.
I'm guessing that you and those who may be listening have read a multitude of stories from people who've been through this experience and how they arrive on the drug, the years of struggle and invalidation that they receive from the medical community, and how they come to learn that it's the drug causing the problem. Those are the constants that I see, that I hear.
Mm-hmm.
Details of how people arrive on the drug, of course, differ.
I noticed one thing, and one of the things I of course, you have seen and I have seen too, quite prevalently, is just people looking for help and needing help from doctors, from therapists, and not finding it. I looked when I was doing some research for this interview on WBAD, on World Benzodiazepine Awareness Day's website, and it has listed on there in-person benzo-wise therapists, and you're the only person listed in that list. And I think this is a perfect example of how hard it is for people out there to find support, whether it be counseling or whether it be physicians. What can we do to try to get more people on this list so people all around the world can find support?
Therein lies, that's a problem, because I personally don't know any therapists who are knowledgeable about this.
Okay.
I'm guessing they are out there.
There's got to be somebody, but how do you find them is the question.
Well, people have found me in various ways, through word of mouth or the internet. Some of the online forums, my name will pop up here and there.
Right.
And I also have my profile in various spots, and I list the fact that I work in this area. It's a desert.
It seems
Sometimes
to be.
I feel like I'm standing in the middle of the desert.
I was going to ask you all this. One of the problems I see all the time, of course, is, and I had this on a previous episode, which was I called the doctor dilemma. And while on Benzo Free, I try to, I make sure that I tell people that it's best to do this through, of course, doctor supervised to taper. That try not to do it on your own. You need medical supervision. But so often I get the pushback, of course, from people who say, well, my doctor put me on this. No doctors understand this. And I've been struggling with what I tell these people, because I still think it's best to do it with a doctor, even if it's a doctor who is open and you can help learn about what you're going through. It's just good to have a medical professional who can help you with your taper and who can help you with your symptoms as they go along. But I do realize this is difficult for me to get this message through to some of the people who are in the middle of struggling and have had such horrible experience with these doctors. Do you find that too? And what do you say to patients like that?
Yeah, it's if I feel like I'm standing in a desert in terms of not having a lot of colleagues, even one other colleague who does this kind of work. Imagine how people who are wanting to get off their medication must feel. There is a serious lack of understanding in the medical community. Whether that's turning a blind eye or they truly are ignorant to the problems associated with these drugs. I can't say definitively if it's one way or the other, and it's probably both. Misinformation that comes from the pharmaceutical industry around their products, They're motivated by one thing, and that's their bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about patient safety. It is not about patient safety.
I understand.
When Xanax was first introduced, this was after the Valium, the insights that were gained about Valium in the UK, and Xanax was introduced in the U.S. as being non-addictive and not as powerful. and we've come to learn that, in fact, it's far more powerful, far more addictive than Valium. It binds much more tightly to the receptor than Valium does.
Well, Xanax, Klonopin, and Halcyon are all, 20 times as potent as Valium?
Yes.
So yeah, that's heavy doses of drugs we've been taking.
Yeah, but because Xanax could be prescribed at 0.125 and
right.
0.25 and 5. They're just tiny little doses.
Well, it sounds that way.
You think that a 0.25 milligram tab of Xanax is equivalent to, what is that, 5 milligrams?
5 milligrams, yeah.
Of Valium. That's a lot of drugs.
That is a lot of drugs. And I know for people tapering, that becomes a huge issue because so many think, and I did this, I got down to a 1/4 milligram of Klonopin, and I thought, okay, that's the smallest dose I can do now, I'll just drop off. I didn't think I was just suddenly dropping off of 5 milligrams of Valium.
Yeah.
Let's move into more of the awareness and some of the activism you've been involved with. I noticed you're one of the medical advisors to the Benzodiazepine Information Coalition. How did you get involved with that organization?
They approached me and
Great.
asked me if I would join them, and I said sure. I really appreciate what this organization is doing, and I think that the majority of my efforts, once I finished graduate school and became licensed, was to work one-on-one with people and their families, and was no longer spending a lot of time in the online benzo community.
Understand.
Joining BIC was an opportunity to make a contribution
Right.
in a slightly different way if called upon. And this interview is one such instance.
Good. Yeah, we're so glad that you are involved. I've been very impressed with that organization since I've been working with Benzo Free, and we seem to be in line along with some other organizations of what can be done, and this is going to be a problem that medical establishments along with the patients can work together to solve. And I admire them for taking that stance and that moved in the right direction, because I think we can only work within the system much better than we can fighting against it. So we can make this change, I believe.
Yeah, this change. To my mind, that's one person at a time.
I totally agree. I totally agree. That's where I've done things like Big and Ashton Manual or letters to certain doctor visits, and I think one by one we all can do that. And I think you're doing that too, and I think that's pretty amazing.
Part of my experience was coming to this, walking out of the fog and kind of finding my agency, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't up to doctors to make decisions about my life. It was up to me.
Right.
And that was very freeing. Terrifying, but freeing. I'm kind of that generation that was taught that doctors know best. And so I had never really, I challenged it a little bit along the way, but not to the degree that I challenge it now.
Right.
And really think critically about any kind of medical intervention I might be considering. That is something that I try to teach to people, is that you have to, I think part of this withdrawal and recovery journey is coming to that understanding that it's your body, it's your life, and
right.
It is your decision.
Yeah, taking responsibility for our own health, I think, was one of the best things I've learned from this experience, is that I'm in charge of my own health. and
Yeah.
I can work with as a partner with people, but they don't tell me what to do.
Yep. And there's no better boot camp for that than Benzo Withdrawal.
I would agree with you on that
because
one.
You're alone with it.
You are.
It's an experience that the majority of the medical community does not recognize,
Right.
and so you have to figure out how to get through it. And that often entails making changes in many, if not all, domains of your life to accommodate or cope with what's happening. And that is a challenge. Yeah.
You had mentioned about being a moderator of a support group, or support groups.
Mm-hmm.
Is it plural? Two different ones, or?
Well, I guess it was plural. I worked on the we call it the Yahoo Benzo Support and Recovery Group.
Okay.
Or Benzo Withdrawal Support and Recovery Group. It was the first online benzodiazepine withdrawal community, originally founded by Geraldine Burns, back in, I think that was 1999. And so that was the community that I first encountered.
Right.
And that group eventually closed down, and two of us started kind of another group that would bridge people moving into other communities. That was a very short-lived group. I think that was 2 years.
Okay. Did you, when you were going through your own withdrawal, did you use the action manual, and do you recommend that to people now?
I did not use the action manual because I didn't know about it.
That's right. You went cold turkey off of 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I trusted that. It's interesting. I often share this story with people because it was a profound moment of awakening for me. I think I was 2 days into withdrawal, and I can remember walking from my study out to the kitchen and being in a kind of a middle room where the sun was coming through the window. And 13 years later, I can still remember the details of that, what that looked like.
Right.
And I can see, the objects that were sitting on the kitchen counter. I remember what I was wearing. I can see a dust kitty on the floor. My dogs were right there. There was these rays of sunlight coming through the window. It was just an exquisitely beautiful, bright January winter day. And then just stopping in my tracks and going, oh my God, have I been duped?
Wow.
Saying that out loud.
Yep.
I was alone. And in that moment, really opening up to this idea that I'd been lied to.
Yeah.
It felt like, or opening up to this profound sense of betrayal.
Mm-hmm. I think so many of us have noticed that same feeling in our lives at different times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think that that kind of institutional betrayal, which is what I call it, institutional betrayal,
Sure.
is a very difficult thing to reconcile once you're on the other side.
Yeah.
Once you have that loss of trust in the medical community, it's hard to interact with that and trust that it's going to be useful to you or helpful.
Right.
And sometimes we really do need doctors.
And we do, and that
right?
we do, and that's the thing.
And sometimes we really do need various kinds of drugs to treat, say, an infection.
What kind of myths have you seen about benzos? I think we all kind of see those out there, but what do most people's expectations have about them, people you run into?
They're harmless.
Yeah.
They're helpful. They work. And they do. To be clear, they really, really work.
Well, and that's actually the problem. If they didn't work, we wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah. I mean, they're of all the psych drugs out there, they're exceedingly effective.
Yeah.
In the moment, in terms of calming things down and helping someone get their feet on the ground. It's the more insidious effects of that drug, that class of drugs, that I think flies underneath our radar, and we don't realize what's happening. I was on a benzo for pretty darn close to 20 years, and I did not know that I had a physical dependency. I did not know.
You and me both.
I never thought twice about going off 10 milligrams of Klonopin cold turkey.
Oh my gosh.
I remember saying to the doctor, "Oh, sure, no problem."
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, what would you say to people right now who are, in the middle of it, dependent, going through withdrawal, or, getting ready to just, prostrated, totally at wit's end? What do you say to them to encourage them? What do you say to them to help them keep going?
I think that it's so, one of the biggest challenges to someone who's in the middle of this is that it's next to, if not impossible, to imagine things being a different way.
Yeah.
And so finding something to hang on to. Where do you find your sense of hope?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not able to find that, find someone who can carry that for you.
I like that.
The reason I start with that idea is that this is a temporary situation, even if it's been going on for years.
Right.
In the most unfortunate of circumstances, where someone's in a protracted state going out years, I am staunchly grounded in the fact that this is a temporary situation.
Good.
I am unwavering in that belief.
Your story alone gives a lot of hope, I think, to many people.
Yeah. And I think also that hearing the stories of other people who've been through this, who've come out the other side, who find themselves back in their lives, is something to hang on to.
Yeah.
There's a wellspring of hope to be found there.
I agree.
One thing that I want to add to that is that what one person experiences does not tell the story of what you experience. And comparing yourself to any story that you read can cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because we each go through this experience in our own unique way. And there's so many factors contributing to how we go through the experience and how we experience it on an emotional and psychological level.
Yeah. Everybody's different.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of common threads, and we can talk with each other and look to each other's stories and say, yeah, I recognize that. I know that. How each person comes to this and how they go through it is going to be unique.
I know. It'd be nice if I could just reach out and show the people who are in the middle of it what it looks like on the other side, that there is the hope, there is that rainbow, there is a good life on the other side, and, help them get through that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do. And I know, because when I was in it, and I'm sure the same for you, I had very little hope myself. So, but I kept going. And, we got through this. So, and here we are talking today.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Great to meet you, Dee.
You too. And that's one of the things too, is this podcast and everything is so serious. The subject is so serious. I do try to hopefully mix a little levity in now and then. So I'd like to close out with just a few kind of light questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
These are just kind of for fun. So first off, clean desk or messy desk?
Totally messy.
Messy?
It's a disaster zone.
Well, that's supposed to be the sign of intelligence, I think, isn't it?
I don't know.
That's what I've heard. I'm going with that.
I call it I don't have time to deal with it.
I know.
Don't.
If you had to, just off the top of your head, pick your favorite restaurant, what would it be?
Thai.
Thai food? What would you consider your favorite city?
Suttons Bay, Michigan.
Oh, really? Great.
Mm-hmm. It's a small town.
Where's that located?
It's in northern Michigan, in the little finger of Michigan, or what Michiganders call the little finger.
Ah, is that in the UP, or is that?
No, it's in the lower. It's
Okay.
the northern lower portion of Michigan, lower peninsula.
Oh, good. And I noticed in your bio that it says you're an artist. What discipline?
My training is in ceramics and sculpture.
Really? That's fascinating. How did you get into that?
Oh my gosh, 8th grade.
Oh, really?
Like that. Just in an art class, started working with clay and started doing kind of abstract sculptures. And by the time I got out of graduate school, I was doing life-size abstract figurative work.
Oh,
and,
wow.
These large abstract vessels thrown on the wheel that were then altered.
That's really impressive. Did any of that help you when you're going through your cold turkey?
No.
Did you rely on that at all, or do you not do that anymore?
Well, I have not worked in clay in many years, mostly for physical reasons. My studio sits quietly and neglected out in my backyard.
Okay, understand.
It has for many years.
That's okay. My drum set sits in the basement, neglected most of the time too. So I
Yeah.
understand.
Oh my gosh,
I know.
I can't imagine playing the drums right now.
Oh, really?
That's one of those things that still persists for me, is kind of sensitivity to
See,
sound.
yeah, that's one I didn't. That's why it's so different. Like you said, I didn't get that one, and I actually played drums throughout. It helped me, my akathisia. It helped me work out my restlessness, and it became wonderful
Fantastic.
therapy for me. But it just goes to prove how different each of us is in this experience. You know, it's something you couldn't have handled with your sensitivity to sounds, and it's something I was, made use of.
I think, one way I did use sort of the influence of my history in working in the arts was relying on imagery.
Okay.
And using that to kind of ignite my senses. For instance, I used to look at just photographs of like in gardening magazines.
Oh, wow.
And imagine myself in those environments on a sensory level.
That'd be very peaceful.
So really making use of guided imagery was, and I think that is something that was developed through my experience of working in clay. I love that you were able to turn to your drums.
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife would often send me, I'd be watching TV with her in the living room or something, and she'd see me jolting. Instead, she goes, go play your drums. And she'd nudge me. And she knew. It's like, okay, I'll go. Because I was so restless. I couldn't sit there.
What were you tapping into?
What's that?
What were you tapping into? What was it that you were tapping into when you turned to your drum? So that's kind of the...
You know what it did? I have an ADHD addled brain on top of benzo, so it stops my brain. It calms everything down. It helps me become centered. When I'm playing the drums, everything else kind of stops for me. And that was probably the biggest blessing of it, was that I could just shut down the obsessive thoughts. I could shut down the anxiety. I could shut down different things, and I could just be one with the music. And it was one of the few places I could do that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Everyone who goes through this comes out the other side with having learned something quite valuable about themselves. And I think that those are aspects, part of what we can pass down to others who are going through this.
Right.
What is it that grounds you? What is it that ignites your spirit? What is it that allows you to, apart from benzo withdrawal, be in this crazy, chaotic world?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so those are things that we can go back and really nurture as we go through this very extreme kind of experience.
Right. Well, as we close, is there anything else that I didn't ask or anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I will say again that this experience is temporary.
Yeah.
That's a very difficult thing to hang on to. And so if you're having difficulty doing that, turn to someone who can help you figure that out. Figure out what it is that's going to allow you to get through this.
Mm.
We are very resilient beings, and if you can key into those strengths and the things that have allowed you to survive in other places in your life, those are things that can be very applicable to right now.
Well, thank you so much, and it's been such a pleasure talking with you today, Liz.
You too, Dee.
Yeah.
And I thank you again for inviting me to share this hour with you today.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope you come back again and can talk to us again at a later time.
I'd love to.
Thank you so much. Okay, so that was our first interview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let me know what you think. I really look forward to hearing your feedback. I again want to thank Liz for taking the time to share with us what she has learned from both her personal and professional experience with benzos. I really appreciate you taking the time and joining us on today's show. Thank you, Liz. Take care, and I hope we can talk soon. And that finally, after a lot of time, wraps up this podcast episode. Sorry this is such a long one. Before we get to our closing, I do want to sneak in our 25-second disclaimer, so here we go. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice in any way. The host of this podcast is not a medical professional, nor is he engaged in rendering medical, health, or psychological advice, nor any other kind of personal or professional services. Withdrawal, tapering, or any change in dosage of benzodiazepines, non-benzodiazepines, thiazidines, or any other prescription drug should only be done under the direct supervision of a licensed physician. Our full disclaimer can be viewed on our website at benzofree.org/disclaimer. Our next episode is episode 11, and it will be released next Wednesday. I plan to return back to our symptoms series soon. Not sure which one yet, but I'm open to suggestions, but I'm kind of hoping next episode will be the next one on the symptom series, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you again for joining me today, and please let me know how we did. Keep calm, taper slowly, and take care of yourself. I'll see you next time.